Hello and welcome to a special holiday edition of Power and Politics. I'm David Cochrane. 2024 started poorly for the Liberals, and it got worse as it went along. The governing party lost ground in the polls, they lost key seats in key by-elections, and then they lost the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister on the day of the fall economic statement. Chrystia Freeland's stunning resignation was a punctuation mark on what has been a troubling story for the Liberals, a story where the conclusion on the future of the Prime Minister and his government has yet to be written. To dive into the year ahead and check the political pulse of the major parties, I'm joined now by our party insiders. Greg MacEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer and now with Can Strategies. Melanie Richer is a former Director of Communications for the New Democratic Party and now a senior consultant with Earnscliffe Strategies. And Fred DeLorey, former Conservative campaign manager and partner at North Star Public Affairs. All right, during the show, we're going to assess the state of each of your parties and pick some issues to watch in 2025. So let's start with those governing Liberals.
Every leader, every party has a best before date. Our best before date is here.
They have an opportunity to vote with middle-class Canadians.
My government will continue to step up on the fight against climate change.
Watching the Conservatives win in St. Paul means that, like, everything we're working on could be thrown in a trash bin.
The Liberal Party, as is the Liberal government, totally united on holding the Conservative Party to account.
What is it you want to do in a fourth term that you couldn't do in the first three?
Oh no, it's continuing to meet the moment for Canadians.
People have had enough. They've tuned him out, and they want him to go.
We're going to continue to have great conversations about what is the best way to take on Pierre Poilievre in the next election, but that'll happen with me as leader.
Chrystia Freeland this morning has decided to leave cabinet.
The next steps are that he should resign.
I think he needs to go, yeah.
Okay, so what could the next year, that's a lot in 2024, Greg. And look, just to let the audience know, timestamp this conversation. We're having this before the Prime Minister has given a final answer and before he's fully shuffled his cabinet, other than to put Dominic LeBlanc into finance. So just bear that in mind as you're listening to this conversation. So there's still a lot of unknowns, Greg. What do you think needs to happen in 2025 for the Liberals to have any hope of coming back?
I don't think it's changed what needs to be done. I don't know how much more a leader needs to hear and see happen before you get the message. The intro showed a clip of your interview with the Prime Minister, which I believe was in June.
June, yeah.
And it was kind of remarkable in itself that a sitting Prime Minister showed up in a studio live and took a bunch of questions. And we were told that there were going to be improvements on communications back in 2023, that this was a big issue. Media relations is a big part of it. I know everyone wants to say it's all comms. Comms doesn't fix everything, but if there's deficiencies, you fix the deficiencies. Like a lot of people at this table, I have a background in communications, so that's probably my bias and what I notice. Mm-hmm. When the Prime Minister answered that question, it didn't meet the moment. And that was a bit troubling. The Prime Minister would, on one hand, go to the foreign interference inquiry and, just exemplary. You think, okay, this guy knows his file, and that's great. And then he would do an interview with Liberal MP Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, a podcast where he answered a few questions. And some of his answers around why the Liberals lost the by-elections were troubling. Not enough time on the ground, I think. And again, the buck stops with the PM because, not only do you call the date for the by-elections, you also caused the by-elections in the cases of, shuffling Carolyn Bennett and David Lametti out of cabinet. Advertising. Well, the ads didn't work on me, says Justin. Well, yeah, but we've known Justin Trudeau in Canada. If you were alive and watching the news in 1971, you're aware that, he was, born, first child to a sitting, Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau. So it doesn't compute. So your next step is, if he is not hearing this, who around him is telling him what's really going on? And it's been a lot of the same people for a long time. And my, poli-sci profs will be shocked that I paid attention to, the JFK era and Bay of Pigs and the concept of groupthink. And groupthink is where you have a lot of people who are like-minded, but the challenge function is no longer in the room.
Right.
And I love the challenge function as a communications boss in politics or in the private sector. Before you do something big, you want to say, are we missing anything? So that person who doesn't have a lot of experience but is thinking about something has the courage to say, what if they come back with this?
Right.
And you go, you know what, you're right, we got to add another paragraph, we got to change our approach. That doesn't seem to be happening. So that's the big concern. Right.
Like, what if we ask Chrystia Freeland to leave finance and she doesn't want to go, Fred? That seems like the sort of question that maybe they should ask, right? Because, the comms, the tactics, the ads, all of these things, the people telling him what's going on out there now are his caucus and some of his cabinet ministers. And he still doesn't seem to be listening because the country, based on all the data and all the outcomes, wants him to leave.
It's incredible. The clips that you just showed here were all Liberal MPs calling him to go.
Yes.
It is we've never seen this before. A sitting prime minister being bombarded like this. He is at historic lows in the numbers. His own caucus, his right-hand person just left cabinet. It's disastrous for them. If they're trying to figure out the path to victory, it's gone. It's not there under him. I don't think the Liberals can recover at all. I don't think a new leader's going to help. I think they're too far gone if he had left a year or two ago.
Recover in what sense? Recover to win or recover to raise the floor and maybe come second and be the official opposition in the next election?
It is possible if Trudeau were to leave, they could become the official opposition. I think that's possible. Mm-hmm. With him, the question is, are they in third or fourth? The Bloc Québécois will be the official opposition if Trudeau is the leader of the Liberal Party in the next election. It's the Bloc is growing. We can talk more about that later, about nationalism in Quebec or separatism is taking more root there. There's this situation where Trudeau's not rising actually to the moment. If he thinks the government is supposed to be doing that, and that's what they're doing, he's not doing it.
Mel, it's fascinating. To Fred's point, the clips we played were all Liberals, and there's more since we built that montage. And, when I was a younger man and reading the Globe and Mail and Ed Greenspan was writing about the Martin Chrétien fights, it was always a senior Liberal insider on background. Now they're on camera, on the record, and on the move to try to force the Prime Minister to leave. It's a remarkable thing, and this continues next year if he doesn't go.
Absolutely. And, there's been a bit of conversation leading up to this moment saying, oh, is it fair for them to be out in public doing this? But from what we understand is they've done it privately for so long, right? And they've done everything they can.
Since the caucus retreat in London.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And they've done, it sounds like they've done everything that they can to raise this with the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's team, internally with people that they think has weight to make things change. And nothing has happened. No messaging, no, caucus management, nothing. You talked about meeting the moment. That's the words that kind of hit me in the face a little bit. I don't know that any Canadian thinks that you've met the moment in the last, I don't know, I want to be fair and say year, but it's probably more than that, right? The meeting people where they're at, I don't think anybody believes that to be true from this current Prime Minister and his government. So the fact that they're saying it out loud, I think it's because they've tried and they haven't gotten anywhere and now they have no tools left. And there's been a bit of, some folks are doing it for their own partisan interests. Some folks don't want to lose their seat, etc. I'm sure there's a lot of that, absolutely. But I also think that people are seeing what we're potentially up against with a Conservative Prime Minister, and they're saying, hey, we're going to give everything we can and we're going to fight to make sure that Pierre Poilievre doesn't have an easy path to Prime Minister, and are saying we got to do something.
So Mel, the answer to that question where he says continuing to meet the moment, I took that to mean they believed the programs they were doing, largely with the push from the NDP, as you've repeatedly pointed out, was meeting the moment by meeting the needs. But elections have to be about the future. He never really gave that to me in June. I still don't know if he's given a better answer as we do this in December.
Yeah, I think we've been saying that for as long as this panel has been assembled. Why are you running again? If people like us who are paying as close attention to politics as we are don't know why he wants another 4 years, other than he doesn't like Pierre Poilievre and he doesn't want his vision of what Canada is to be defeated by Pierre Poilievre, I don't know what hope the Liberals have that, folks like my parents or folks who are watching the news understand why this guy's running again, understand what he is going to do for people, because you straight up asked him, and all he was able to say is continue to meet the moment. That to me doesn't mean anything, particularly when he hasn't been able to show that in the last few months, despite these great programs that have come to fruition. But again, not because of his government, but because of Jagmeet Singh.
Greg, it's interesting that if you listen to the Prime Minister's motivation for wanting to stay, it's to stop Pierre Poilievre. If you listen to the caucus's motivation in wanting him to leave, it's to stop Pierre Poilievre, right? And for the elections I've covered, where Justin Trudeau has been the leader, he has outworked his opponents, like 6, 7, 8 events a day, limitless energy. He will not have that advantage with Pierre Poilievre. And you talked about the lack of shift to communication, the lack of move on ads and tactics. Does the team look like it has the urgency and the energy to take on a guy like Poilievre and his team in an election next year?
No, they don't. And the reason I'm being emphatic on that is the way that the shuffle of Chrystia Freeland was handled. I don't know anyone who can understand why you could argue her second biggest speech of the year. And one business day before it's to happen, you're telling them that they're done. So you were going to expect, as her boss, that she's going to deliver this speech and do all the media and do the best job she can, knowing full well she's being demoted. How did they not think that it was going to be seen as a demotion? If it had happened, we would be talking about this as a demotion. And it went from, that the Conservatives would have called for her resignation based on that deficit. Right. And instead, they're praising her. They cheerfully walked into this propeller, and that's why they've lost so much confidence of their supporters, because they can't see what is just blindingly neon obvious.
On the demotion part, I found it interesting that she was supposedly offered the Canada-US role, which should be a major, major role. We're looking at a potential huge catastrophe with the 25% tariff threat. But the fact that it was told that she wasn't brought to Mar-a-Lago because she isn't well liked by the Trump team, and that isn't someone they want on that file, I think really, if that was out there and they didn't bring her there, and then they offer her that role, I think it really reinforces how the role isn't real or wasn't meant to be real at all, and it's quite insulting.
Yeah, I wonder, Mel, if it was the demotion or was it the demotion coupled with the prelude of all the leaks, particularly in the Globe and Mail, from people inside PMO apparently and inside senior ranks of the government, expressing dissatisfaction with her political and communication skills, which she then demonstrated to her full capacity on the day she left. Because I think she had demonstrated the willingness to suffer some things as long as she wasn't being deliberately humiliated. But this, I think, probably just became too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not funny, but interesting that the blame on communications has been laid at her feet the way that it has. I'm not going to pretend that I think that she's a particularly persuasive communicator. I don't find her persuasive in a lot of the things that she communicates, but the Prime Minister is setting the direction of what the party, what the government is talking about. So if you want to blame somebody for a lack of message, if you want to blame somebody for a lack of narrative, that's the Prime Minister that has to own that. And to try to pass the buck off and say, all of our problems are because Minister Freeland isn't able to communicate is not just, humiliating, insulting. It's just also out to lunch. I don't think anybody believes that, whether they like Minister Freeland or don't. I think people, whether they like her or not, were like, this was not a Prime Minister who understands his part in what is going wrong with this government. It's somebody who's trying, again, to blame somebody else. And what's interesting maybe that I would just add is the fact that the Prime Minister and his team were surprised by this on Monday, after telling her this on Friday, is astounding to me. And they've done this to particularly women ministers now 3 times, and have been surprised when those ministers have said, no, sir, let me clear the record here. Is I think a whole other thing that should be studied.
Well, in fairness, Bill Morneau, Marc Garneau, David Lametti, but they have also gone out the door and then had difficult things to say. Like there is something about the breakdown in the relationship between the First Minister and his ministers that transcends both genders. But yes, it has been, the women have been the real high-profile one. Greg, last 30 seconds. If Trudeau does go, who's the best person to replace him?
Let's hear it, Greg.
Tough question.
Okay, you're putting me on the spot, so I'm just going to say.
Present company excluded,
I'm
of course.
Really honest. Okay, so Sean Fraser is out of the mix. That would have been my absolute first choice. I would love to see a female leader, but right now there's a guy, and I was quoted in the Hill Times last year about this, and my line about Dominic LeBlanc was, the minister is the message. And Dominic gets stuff done, and he gives me confidence.
Gotcha. Okay. We'll leave it there. We're going to have a lot more to talk about on this. But up next, we're going to talk about the Conservatives. They had a much better 2024. But what's in store for the official opposition in 2025? Stay right there. Welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. We're looking at what's in store for Canadian politics in 2025. We just took a look at the Liberals' fortunes. Now onto the Conservatives. The official opposition riding high in the polls for well over a year now. Can they sustain this lead until the next election?
The next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre.
Life wasn't like this before Justin Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone. And let me say how incredibly proud and even a little bit shocked I was that in the Liberal fortress of St. Paul's, the people voted for our common sense plan.
They can't just throw him out. He can't just run away. They need to face the music. Why won't we have a carbon tax election now?
Justin Trudeau is a big talker and a little doer. Crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder are common in our streets, and he divides to distract from all that he has broken.
Everything on which the Prime Minister spends gets worse.
Now is the time for a carbon tax election to turn the decision away from me or Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Singh or Mr. Carney and put it in the hands of the people.
Okay, back with me are our political insiders, Melanie Richer, Greg MacEachern, and Fred DeLorey. They always take a shot at Mark Carney, Fred, even though we know he's not coming into cabinet. Look, I almost have whiplash going from the 2024 of the Liberals to the 2024 of the Conservatives. I mean, what do they need to do to keep this going in 2025?
Nothing. They could just sit back.
Take the day off?
They could. I know Pierre, and he's going to campaign incredibly aggressively. He doesn't need to. The Liberals are shooting themselves in the foot, just to go back to them on that. But at the end of the day, Poilievre has done a fantastic job as an opposition member and opposition leader. We are going into an election year, and I think he will have to show a bit more government in waiting. I think we're going to see more meat on the bones when it comes to some policies. You know, for the last year or two, people have been asking, like, where's the platform? Why isn't he putting it out? The world keeps changing on us. You can't just put out a platform 6 months ago or a year ago, because now we have Trump and we have tariffs and we have major trade war coming in front of us. And I think Conservatives need to put their attention to that. Affordability is obviously the number one issue, and that's why carbon tax election resonates. But it's going to be one of those things where I don't know what this tariff thing is going to do to us. I don't know what it's going to do to our economy. Maybe it will reinforce his message, or he may have to adapt and change it. The thing is, knowing Poilievre and everything that we've seen over the last number of years, he's going to be able to rise and meet that moment and adjust his message, and I believe that's going to work very well for them.
You know, Mel, going back to our conversation about the Liberals, where, you know, the industry and the energy that Justin Trudeau displayed on the campaign trail, he's always outmatched his opponents. He's not going to do that with Pierre Poilievre. He is the hungriest politician, or one of the hungriest I've ever seen in my life in terms of his energy and desire for that job.
Absolutely. I was talking to former MP Nathan Cullen, you know, I want to say a few months ago, and that's what he was saying. He said, have you ever seen somebody who wants it that bad? And when you want the top job, you need to want it with almost everything that you have. So for sure, the energy that we're going to see from Pierre Poilievre, I think that's fair. I agree with Fred. You're going to eventually have to switch. You're going to have to show people that you can be statesmanlike, that you can be government, that you can make decisions that will benefit people and not just, you know, tear everything down. I'm not as confident that they're going to be able to do that successfully. I guess we'll wait and see. I also don't know that in the face of everything that we're up against with Trump and potential tariffs coming for the U.S., I don't know that the carbon tax election is going to be as persuasive to folks in the new year. I think, you know, just doing a check with folks in my universe who used to bring that up, it seems to have gone away a little bit. So I don't know if they'll need to pivot that messaging. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know that it'll work as well in the new year leading up to the next election, particularly when we are faced against that. So it'll be interesting to see how they shift, how they start putting forward plans, and what that looks like. How are you going to make my life more affordable other than just, we're not going to do what this guy did, I think will be key for them if they want to continue to be in the position that they're in.
Yeah, Greg, the issue set presented by Trump may very well force them to shift, but I think the benefit for them of having been on things like axe attacks and that is they were speaking to the issues of people at the time, and they will have that baked in as you're focused on the same things I'm focused on, even if you do shift to a more urgent thing in the moment, right?
Yeah, and Mel raises a really good point. There is some question about whether or not people were really angry about the carbon tax or it was a placeholder just for anger. And the government could never seem to figure that out. I think when Freeland's departure happened, Poilievre did not meet the message moment by talking about carbon tax Carney, because that didn't age very well for a week. Dominic LeBlanc revealed that Mark Carney was no longer in discussions. Right. And that day he was still focused on carbon tax Carney. And I remember being with a group of people like this and everyone going, no, the message you should be is around the finance minister and deputy prime minister just left. Why are you talking about Mark Carney? But it is the script. And we're told that he stays up very late and he works on the script. So his ability to pivot, I think, would be something, if I was working against him, something that I would watch. The other thing I would notice is the conversation that we had when he had his little detour, when he was between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia at the border, and he was with some people that had some nasty flags. He looked a bit disheveled. And I remember the comment at the time, I think on our panel, was he can't help himself with this. And again, that was a judgment moment. You could almost see in the video that the penny dropped, maybe I shouldn't have stopped here. And the other thing I'd be watching is that we want from our leaders at times to represent us, and part of that is going to be empathy. There is going to be a disaster. There's going to be something bad that happens. And just the childish rhetoric, noun the verb, doesn't cut it. Occasionally, when I worked for the Paul Martin government, I get brought into PMO when Media Advance, Torrent Advance were shorthanded. And sadly, I worked on one of the first, when a soldier was repatriated, whose soldier had been killed in Afghanistan. And I was with Prime Minister Martin, and the widow was there, and she had an infant. And it was off camera, you couldn't see there was, the limo there. And I watched Paul Martin turn into a human being and forget about everything else and try to help this widow with an infant get in the car. That made me very happy that I was working for that man in the moment. That's what keeps your people around. I hope that whoever our next prime minister is able to meet that moment as well.
Right. It's verb the noun, not noun the verb.
Sorry.
As you said, it's axe the tax, not tax the axe.
Sorry.
He's had enough taxes on axes.
Liberals at
yeah, exactly.
I will return English decree. Sorry.
No, but that is the construct, right? But Fred, what do you make of that? He is rigidly and effectively disciplined. It has worked. There is a commanding lead. In part because of that, in part because of the mood in the country and people being done with Prime Minister Trudeau after 10 years. These vulnerabilities people point to haven't hurt him so far. What do you see in your head?
I think being disciplined and focused and strong on messaging is a strength, not a weakness. It is so hard to cut through in politics. It's so hard to cut through when people are so distracted. There's so many things in front of us, so many different tools and social media and everything. And he punches through in all of his different platforms and different messagings that he uses. The empathetic side, I've seen Poilievre at local riding events and stuff over the years. He's very empathetic with people. We're going to see that, I think, at different times. We're seeing him in the House of Commons and then doing town halls. But he is someone who does speak to the issues. And I think this is one of his strengths, is seeing what's coming. And that's why inflation, he was predicting it long before it spiked. And that's why he was so far ahead of it. And his messaging was strong on it. He knew it was coming and he was talking about it before it was a big deal.
But just a point on this, unless something dramatic changes, there'll be an election and he'll be the prime minister, right? Something dramatic has to change there. We saw that in Britain with Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and they cruised to this massive majority. And within 6 months, it's like, whoomp, the popularity and the support went down because so many of the issues are completely intractable, or just hard to fix. He's going to have to manage expectations on the other side of it should he win, and put a cabinet out there that has more latitude than the caucus has right now.
Yeah, if you look at what happened in the UK, the UK Labour Party wasn't promising that much different than the UK Conservatives, or at least
people just wanted change,
they wanted change,
and the issues there was.
The Conservatives here do seem to have a much more robust plan or ideas and stuff they want to focus on that I think will be very different. Same time in Labour, their numbers didn't actually go up much. The Conservatives just bottomed out there. Here in Canada, like, Conservatives are at historic highs, as well as Liberals are at lows. Like, there is a rise there with Poilievre.
Yeah, and depending on what happens with the Prime Minister, we'll see if that gap is real, artificial, a little bit inflated. But but it is a persistent lead.
Comes in, and that's why the Carney thing. The assumption is if Trudeau goes, Carney will be the opponent. So Poilievre is preparing for that possibility, and it's important to push that message out. And I think it continues to work for him.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for now because we've looked into our crystal balls for the Liberals and the Conservatives. What's in store for the New Democrats in 2025? Stick around and find out. That's next. And welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. Today we're looking at what's in the magic 8-ball for Canadian politics in the year ahead. We've gone over the Liberals and the Conservatives. Now, what's in store for the NDP in 2025? Their supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals helped achieve a number of NDP priorities such as dental care and pharmacare, but that deal is long over.
We are very serious that pharmacare has to be delivered. Single payer, universal public. We have given the Prime Minister a deadline, a very firm deadline. If they break the agreement, they walk away from the agreement, there is nothing that they can expect from us then. And so I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement. This now means that an election timing has become more uncertain. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are too weak and too beholden to corporate interests. Middle-class families need a break. And the Liberals informed us that they had caved to our demands.
He claimed he had torn up the carbon tax coalition onto which he had signed up, that he was going to stop fighting for his pension and start fighting for the people. But once the votes were counted, he betrayed them again.
We're not going to let Pierre Poilievre tell us what to do. I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go.
Okay, back with me are our political insiders, Fred DeLorey, Greg MacEachern, and Melanie Richer. Mel, this is the year all options are on the table for Jagmeet Singh. What do you think is going to happen with the NDP in 2025?
Well, all options are on the table. So we'll wait and see. I think there's a massive opportunity for Jagmeet and for the NDP this year. I think what they've been trying to do since they walked away from I'm not going to say ripped up, but since they walked away from the supply and confidence agreement earlier this year, is they've seen a shoring of their numbers in that orange-red vote. I think they need a little bit more time to shore back up that orange-blue vote because, of course, a lot of their MPs that they currently have are in orange-blue seats, not orange-red seats. Mm-hmm. And with everything that's happening with the Liberals, I think it's now more than ever a really good opportunity to do that, to leapfrog the Liberals. We've started to see that a little bit more consistently in the polls, that the NDP is able to do that. And we've seen it on issues that we know matter to the NDP and to people, so affordability, housing, and healthcare, where they're a little bit closer to the Conservatives than the Liberals are. So I think there's a massive opportunity for Jagmeet and the NDP in early 2025 to really tell Canadians that if they're looking for change, and if they don't believe that Pierre Poilievre is that change that they want in their lives, that Jagmeet and the NDP can be that change. They just need to step up and step into it. So that's my hope for 2025, but also I think the opportunity for them.
Greg, they haven't seemed to have been able to step up and step into it to this point, right? Like the polls, they may have shored up the liberal red side, the orange-red side of things, but they're kind of still stuck there, high teens, not quite breaking into the 20s.
Yeah, and the clip that was played, the language, beholden to corporate interests, that really sounds like rhetoric on the left from the 1980s. It does not sound like what people say around the kitchen table. I don't hear beholden very often in conversation.
Oh, all the time.
All the time. And I'm not quite sure what corporate interests mean. Yeah. And Mel is an excellent communicator, so I know you probably don't want to, for me to emphasize this, but the thing is, Jagmeet is a really nice guy. He's a very engaging. He's great to talk to. There's something that does not translate from the guy you run into in the street to the guy we see in front of the mic. And I don't know what the issue is. We've talked a lot about the NDP's inability to celebrate the wins that they got. And look, I don't think, years from now, we've run deficits, significant deficits. We went through a worldwide pandemic. I think years from now, I'm not sure people are going to talk about how much dental care costs. I think people are going to see it's going to take a while to kind of get through the system, but people's overall health is going to improve because of that program. And people will say good things about it. But the NDP were not able to kind of capture that now. And I still, for the life of me, can't understand why, one of the nicest, most interesting guys in politics does not translate when he gets behind a mic.
So Fred, what do you think that is? Because often when he gets behind the mic, it's a repetition of the same sort of thing he said the last time he was at the mic, right? About whether it's beholden to corporate interests, he laments all the reasons why this government is failing Canadians, and then he votes with them. Yeah. And so it doesn't compute, I think, with people. Is that the issue, or is there something else there?
Yeah, well, look, he sounds like someone I'd love to have a beer with. He'd be like one of my neighbors. I don't want any of my neighbors running the country, though. That's a whole different.
They said the same thing about you. I
don't want to run the country either. I tried, it didn't work. But look, no, his communication style, Poilievre has eaten his lunch on that worker vote, and a big part of it is because Poilievre is talking to them, where Singh talks about, corporate CEO bosses all the time. He talks about how, he attacked Poilievre and said he's not going to be on the picket line with you. Vast majority of workers do not ever want to be on a picket line. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't, Poilievre's talking about we're going to make life more affordable, and you're talking about picket lines. It just doesn't compute. I think, as Melanie points out, this is a huge opportunity for them. They will not make it. The fact they haven't grown their numbers at all, they're tied with the Liberals who are at historic lows. The progressive vote, if you add the progressive vote up, it's the same as the conservative vote, very similar. It's split in two, the Liberals and the NDP. They need to eat that Liberal vote. They need to go after it. Singh has not proven to be capable at all of doing that. And at the same time, because Trudeau's flailing, he's not going to be able to go at it. So that vote's just going to split in this election, which is going to lead to, I think, an historic route for the Conservatives.
So Mel, how do they do that? How do they sort of become that champion of progressive anti-Poilievre votes? Because let's face it, that's what it's going to come down to. Is it the leader? Is it his messaging? Is it the issues he campaigns on? Is it his style? What do you think needs to change there?
So maybe I'll go back to the Pierre Poilievre eating Jagmeet's lunch. I don't believe that to be true. I think we can just point to Elmer Transcona and see that Pierre Poilievre's message didn't work with workers in that riding, and that Jagmeet was able to keep that seat. What I think needs to happen is to talk to people the way that they need to be talked to. And to your point, I think that if we were to have a Prime Minister Jagmeet Singh, I think a lot of people's lives would be better. So I hope that that's something that they're able to achieve. But as it relates to the corporate welfare stuff, I agree with you. It doesn't necessarily resonate with me either. And I think that that's a big challenge of talking to people and responding to how they're feeling, to the anger that they're feeling, and channeling it into something that you're going to do to make their lives better. I think to do that hope thing, to the pivot to hope thing, I don't think there's anybody better than Jagmeet to do that currently, right now, elected in politics. So I hope they get there, but I agree that the path to pivoting to the path to pivoting to here's how we're going to make your life better. Here's how we understand what you're going through and what we're going to do to improve things. The mechanics of that, how can you support the government, but think he needs that part, the middle part, I think is where the work needs to happen so that folks really hear him as an option.
On that though, we talked about Trudeau's energy in campaigns. We talked about the hunger Poilievre demonstrates. Do we see enough of that from Jagmeet Singh right now? Like, it could be an election at any time, and certainly since the supply and confidence agreement ripped up, are we seeing that industry and energy from the leader of the fourth party who's trying to replace the Liberals as that progressive alternative?
Right. Well, I was on the bus with him in the last election, and I did see that. I will say he is a young dad, or has 2 young kids at home, and that's really challenging.
I hear you.
I think Danny just turned 1 maybe a few weeks ago, and Anhud, I think, is turning 3 in January. So that's definitely challenging of being the kind of dad that you want to be. And I know that that's something that's super important to Jagmeet. And is really lovely to see, but to your point, you do need to have some of that hunger. And where I see that in Jagmeet is the fighter, the taking care of people. We don't talk about his story often, but Jagmeet helped raise his brother. That his father was an alcoholic, and they needed to remove the brother from the home. And Jagmeet, I think, worked 3 jobs to take care of his brother. When he's in that mode, when he's in the mode of, cards are down, people's lives are hard. I've got your back, and I'm going to help you make ends meet. That's, I think, the best Jagmeet. So if we can get that Jagmeet in January and February, I think we're going to see that energy on the campaign from Jagmeet too.
Yeah, it feels like a make or break year for him, right? Third national campaign. It's breakthrough or probably be replaced. Okay, up next, our political insiders break down the big issues they're going to be watching for next year. Stay right there. We'll be right back with that. Welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. Today we've been going over what to expect in the year ahead for the Liberals, the Conservatives and the NDP. But now we're going to open the floor to our political insiders for their picks. Greg MacEachern, Melanie Richer and Fred DeLorey are here. All right, so Greg, what is your big issue to watch in 2025 other than what we've talked about with the parties?
There's a device in American politics called the first 100 days. It goes back to FDR. He won in 33. And he used the phrase about his first 100 days. He had 15 pieces of legislation, depression at the time, and that device is used to judge a lot of judge American presidencies. Clinton, for example, had Nannygate. He went through 2 attorney general appointments. That seems kind of quaint now, considering what Trump has gone through with some of his. He's burning through a lot of media and goodwill, but it's a very, very different time. So I'd be watching how he's going to behave those first 100 days because it often tells you what their presidency is going to be like. Yeah, well, look, if it's anything like what he's done in the run-up to actually going back to the White House, it's going to be busy. Fred, what's your issue to watch in 2025?
Well, I think provincial elections, particularly Ontario, we're seeing, Nova Scotia just went and, everyone's saying incumbents should be struggling now. They broke the record for most seats. The Conservatives did as an incumbent. In Ontario, it looks like they're gearing up. They need a narrative. They need to say why they're going, because they're going a bit early. But if they, their government is only 3 years younger than Trudeau's, and they're still on the upswing and still able to grow. And I think that says a lot about what Doug Ford's doing. We're seeing him on the international stage now, leading Team Canada, apparently, because there's no federal leadership on that.
He's a bit like Tim Houston, a small set of issues that he's hyper-focused on, right? And keeps driving that home. Has a narrative. You keep
idea.
That and the Fez, your 2 big preoccupations. Mel, what's your big thing to watch right now?
Yeah, obviously, based on everything that we've said so far tonight, it's watching for when the federal election comes. If it comes in the winter, I can't imagine with everything that's happened with Minister Freeland, it doesn't come sooner rather than later. So watching for that and what it means for all the parties.
When do you think it will be? I mean, there's this, Parliament comes back January 27th, in theory. We could see confidence votes February, March. The NDP signaling now that all options are on the table. Do you think we look at like a vote in May, April, June, that type of period?
I think it's sooner than that. I can't imagine we make it that far outside of there being a provincial election and not wanting to go at the same time or wanting to make sure that folks in Ontario aren't voting twice so close to each other. I would, if I was a betting person, I would, and I don't have any inside knowledge track like the supply confidence agreement conversation that we had last June. I don't know anything. I don't know when the NDP is planning for this. I just want to set the record straight. I can't see how the government survives to being able to table the budget based off of how things are going in the last few weeks.
It's interesting. It's just because the federal election, we know it's going to happen in 2025 unless there's some dramatic change that pushes it off to 2026. Canada's supposed to host the G7 this summer, right? Something Prime Minister Trudeau is looking forward to. If we end up in a Liberal leadership situation, Fred, who do you think emerges from that? Who do you think enters into it? Who? I know they keep talking about Kearney. Is that who the Conservatives are the most worried about, or is there someone else out there who's an issue for them?
I think the thought is just that he would win it. I think that's what they're preparing for. It's interesting. Liberals have not had a real leadership race in a decade, and things have changed drastically in politics and the way we communicate in the decade. The Conservative Party has gone through 3 federal leadership races in 4 years, in 5 years, and I can tell you each one of those changed drastically from the last because of the way we communicate has changed. I don't think the Liberals are quite prepared for what they're going to be getting themselves into. It is going to be bloody, it's going to be divisive, there's going to be wedge issues that are going to be pulled and prodded. It's not, the Liberal Party traditionally, we always believed was the party that's just about winning elections. It's not actually grounded in any type of ideology. I think that's going to shift. Because if you want to sign up numbers, it has shifted. But I mean, for a leadership race, if you want to win a leadership race, you've got to find those groups of people to sign up. How do you get them to sign up? You got to fire them up on issues, and you got to point out that your opponents are against these issues, and it's going to be a bloodbath.
There's a sliding doors moment. Was it 2017 Andrew Scheer won?
Yes.
Yeah. Maxime Bernier led on every ballot until that. Very different party should Max Bernier have won that race. Mel, we look at the possibility, and look, as we're having this conversation, we don't know what Justin Trudeau is going to do. But, his caucus increasingly and some of his cabinet increasingly want him to go. I mean, who do you think does step in there if it does open up to a standard sort of leadership race?
I genuinely don't know. You mentioned Minister LeBlanc. I think some of the problems that the Liberals currently have is, one, they're not connecting with people. I don't know that Carney can do that. So I think, honestly, Carney would be a gift to a party like the NDP. Minister LeBlanc, though, would fill he's a little bit more colloquial. I think he's a little bit more able to talk to people the way that people talk. But I think the other thing about both LeBlanc and Carney is the statesmanship, it's the steady hand is the other problem that the Liberals are having. I think those are the two problems, the disconnected from the reality of people, which I don't think Carney helps, and the stable hand. I think both of those could be contenders for that. But again, like you point to the issues base, I don't know that either of those people fire people up, right? Yeah, so that's the question. Totally. But the flip side of that is, if you look to what happened in Ontario, I don't know that Bonnie Crombie fired a lot of people up either, and she won. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in this context of, it seems like the table is set. So what do you do? Do you point to the rebuild for a few years from now? So a lot of questions, and hard to see how that would go or what direction it would go in.
If they get that pro-business central banker in Kearney, the beholden to corporate interest line might actually work this time.
Like robot, right? Like unable to really talk to people in the way that
well, it's hard to know, right? Like until you see it, right? And we've never seen it. He's just been talked about more than anybody's ever put their name on a ballot, anyone who's ever gone into cabinet, anyone who's ever sort of been truly active politically, aside from a couple of cameos at conventions. So you just don't know. But Greg, you mentioned LeBlanc earlier. There is a coalescing of thought in a lot of Liberal circles that he has the temperament and the political skills and the communication skills to handle Poilievre as better than any of the other names you hear, such as Melanie Joly, Anita Anand, Champagne, Kearney. I don't know if that's where it ended up going. I don't know if he wants it. But I mean, who do you think would be the contenders should the Prime Minister decide he's going to step away?
The people that are rumored to have won it, and there was a lot of speculation about this last year at the Liberal biennial, Anita Anand, Minister Champagne, Melanie Joly. I know a lot of people wanted Sean Fraser to run. Dominic's name emerged well before this week, as when people started to get concerned about the future. I've heard some other names. I don't know if they're wishful thinking. Obviously, the perennial Mark Carney element of this, but there's a line from Rose Kennedy when she was talking about her son. Teddy Kennedy ran for Senate really young, and she was talking about his ambition, and she said he would have gone into the priesthood, but he wanted to start off by being bishop. And I will tell you, in politics, I've seen this in municipal politics in this city, when people come into politics and they start at a very high level, and you are sworn in as a cabinet minister, you get the car and driver, you get the department, and you don't understand how it's not just partisan politics, it's how partisan politics work in your party. Because our three parties operate very, very differently. And those people are always the ones who get the clothesline. They don't see it coming. And I do I've always wanted to write an op-ed called In Praise of Partisans, because, we know our business. You might have been very successful in corporate Canada or somewhere else as a writer, an actor, but it doesn't necessarily instantly translate to success in politics.
I go back, we've talked about it throughout the segments, about the hunger. Because I'd watched this in provincial politics back home, Fred, is that, this is the next premier. And the timing isn't right, not going to do it. And they always found a reason not to go. You look at Pierre Poilievre, you look at, if you really want to do it, you go when the door is open. And if you don't, someone else is going to go through it when you are ready, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, right now, if you're also competing for the prime ministership, not just leader of a potential fourth party if you wait till after the next election. So you got to go now. The hunger thing is interesting. You mentioned in the last number of leadership races I've been in, there's one correlation I found. Everyone who won of the three federal leadership race and the Ontario leadership race was the candidate who called the most people. Simple statistics. Someone who will work those phones and have that hunger, because you got to work, and if you don't, you can't win a leadership.
Yeah, Mel, it is going to be the question that lingers throughout the holidays. You know, as the Prime Minister does his reflection, presuming so we don't get surprised, on Christmas Day, which is his birthday. If you had to pick someone to come out of it, who could make the most phone calls, do the organization, and win a leadership race, who do you think it would be?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. The hunger piece, I don't know. Out of the folks that we've mentioned, I think the problem is a lot of the names that we've mentioned have been in cabinet for a long time. So there's some tired there. There's some alliance, some allegiance to Justin Trudeau there. So how do you make yourself a little bit different? The other name that we didn't mention that I think I've heard a lot about is Christy Clark, and I see her like she's campaigning as if there's no prime minister.
She's done it before too.
And
she's won a leadership race before.
And she's capital P political. You know what I mean? Like that sort of a hunger thing. So
spent a lot of time in France apparently this summer learning French. So good for her.
Interesting. Okay, we got to leave it there. We're out of time. We're going to talk more. Greg, we'll get back to you in 2025 for sure. We were actually You're good? All right.
I'm good.
Look, I want to thank you for being here every Friday, every big breaking political day, and being disagreeing without being disagreeable. There goes my pen. Greg MacEachern, Melanie Richer, Fred DeLorey. You watch them every Friday right here on Power and Politics. I'm David Cochrane. Thank you for watching this special holiday edition of P&P. More CBC News to follow right here on CBC News Network.